Okay, now be seated.
Ready for the jury?
Yes, sir. Very quickly, one thing before we get started, just wanted to alert the court that after this witness, our next witness will be the pathologist. So obviously, I wanted to make the court aware and the defense aware, which they are aware, and the gallery aware of the graphic and sensitive nature of that testimony. Additionally, obviously, all those exhibits will be under seal, or we would request they be under seal to protect those particular images because of their graphic nature.
And Your Honor, it's, they're extraordinarily graphic, the autopsy photos. And so both Mr. Waters and I are concerned that no display, whether anything, we're going to cover our monitors, but need to make sure no monitor is visible to the public. So we're just concerned about it. It's the kind of thing you don't want to see replicated somewhere else.
Yes, sir. Okay, very good. You may bring the jury.
The jury is present, sir.
Very good. Thank you. Cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Agent Zapata.
Good afternoon.
We've gone through a pretty long list of things that you did analysis on. Did you do any analysis on any clothing or anything from the victims' bodies other than Maggie Murdaugh's fingernail clippings?
I analyzed Margaret Murdaugh's fingernail clippings, Paul Murdaugh's fingernail clippings, as well as buccal swabs.
And when you say they're buccal swabs, that was simply to collect their DNA to perform analysis. Is that correct?
That was the known standard that I used to make comparisons. Yes.
Maggie Murdaugh's left finger nail clippings, did you found unidentified male DNA?
Foreign to Margaret Murdaugh, there were some alleles present, yes.
When we say some alleles present, was there DNA from an unrelated male under her fingernails?
For items, one of the alleles indicates a male contributor.
And this was an unrelated male?
Do you mean unrelated as in unrelated?
Well, let me strike that and rephrase. Were Paul and Alec Murdaugh excluded as contributors?
Yes.
So male DNA under her fingernails, not from Paul, not from Alec Murdaugh.
The foreign DNA to her, yes, they were excluded as contributors.
Would it have been possible to perform any further analysis on this, a Y chromosome profile?
It is possible, but because there were so many male individuals who were related to each other as standards that were submitted, it was decided that that would not be the best course of action to continue analysis because the male, the Y chromosome testing that you're discussing is inherited along the males of a familial line. And so there will be no way to distinguish between any related people, any related males.
When, I guess, making this determination, were you all aware, as we've had previous testimony, that Maggie Murdaugh had been to a nail salon late that afternoon?
I did not have any information about that, no.
So if her nails were quite clean coming to Giselle, she doesn't have a lot of opportunity to have contact with unrelated males.
I overrule the objection.
So if her nails were clean coming to Moselle, it doesn't appear that she has much opportunity to have that kind of contact with unrelated males, does it?
It could be DNA, DNA under fingernails. You're picking up DNA anytime you touch an item potentially. If she did get her nails done, it's possible that somewhere at the nail salon, there was DNA that she picked up under her fingernails. We can't really tell you how or when the DNA got there, but at any point in time between getting her nails done and arriving home, she could touch an object and potentially DNA from that object could be under her fingernails, or she can touch an individual and their DNA be under her fingernails in that way.
Are you familiar with something called CODIS?
Yes.
And what is CODIS?
CODIS is a database that we use to enter unknown profiles from a crime to attempt to identify links between different cases and also between individuals who maybe have been arrested or convicted of a crime.
So it's a database that you can submit DNA samples to and see if you get a hit and can identify whose DNA it is.
Correct.
Was this unidentified unknown male DNA found under Maggie Murdaugh's fingernails submitted to CODIS?
It was not because, like we explained earlier, there were only 3 alleles present that were foreign to her, and that does not meet the threshold of information necessary to enter a profile into CODIS.
And it was decided not to do this further Y chromosome analysis on it.
Correct.
Is it unusual in your experience to not test the victim's clothing? For DNA? Wouldn't their hands always be an area of interest?
Again, it depends. If there is evidence of a struggle, then perhaps, which is why we would take the fingernail clippings. If we don't know, then sometimes you take the fingernail clippings just to see if we can get some DNA from the fingernail clippings. But
And the one time something was taken from them, it revealed unknown, unidentifiable male DNA.
a very partial low-level profile foreign to Margaret.
And you found Maggie Murdaugh's DNA on the 300 blackout shell casings that were recovered. Is that correct?
Are you referring to item 7.1?
Yes.
She was included as a contributor to that item, yes.
And your report doesn't separate between individual shell casings, does it?
No,
And is your report consistent with one of those shell casings being found in physical contact with her body?
I believe there was information from the crime scene that one of the shell casings was recovered from underneath her body.
And is your report consistent with that, that DNA could be transferred by physical contact?
That's possible, yes.
And for the shot shells found in the feed room that had a presumptive blood test positive, you found Paul's DNA on those, is that correct?
Paul was included as a contributor to that item, yes, 10.1.
And is that consistent with those being found in a room soaked with his blood?
It would not be unexpected.
And for the steering wheel of the Chevy Suburban, there was a positive human blood test, and I believe you found Maggie and Alex Murdaugh's DNA on the steering wheel.
For item 56?
Yes.
For item 56, which was a mixture, was interpreted as a mixture originating from two individuals, both Margaret and Richard Alexander Murdaugh were included as contributors.
So yes.
They were included as contributors.
Yes. And is that consistent with someone who has handled Margaret Murdaugh's deceased body, which is unfortunately covered in blood, and then driving the vehicle?
I can't ever tell you exactly how the DNA was deposited onto an item. I can just tell you what the DNA profile is.
And I'm not asking you to, I'm just asking, is it consistent? Is there anything in your report that would exclude that explanation?
It's a possibility.
And for the two shotguns, neither one of those had Paul's DNA, is that correct?
Can you give me an item number,
I
please?
can. Sorry, just a sec. The first one is item 15.
Item 15 were swabs from the Camo Benelli 12-gauge shotgun from receiver forward of the loading port, and Paul Murdaugh was excluded as a contributor to that item.
And the other shotgun was item 22.
For 22.4, which was interpreted as a mixture originating from two individuals, Paul Murdaugh was excluded as a contributor. For item 22.5, due to the relatedness of the contributors, I was not able to offer a conclusion regarding Paul Murdaugh. So that's a situation that we talked about earlier, where sometimes if there's a small amount of DNA present, we cannot distinguish between related individuals. And so I was not able to make any comparisons to Paul to that item.
But you're not able to say for either one of those shotguns that Paul's DNA was detected.
He was excluded as a contributor for 22.4. For 22.5, I couldn't make any comparisons to him either way.
And again, is there anything in your test results that would be inconsistent with somebody who, with Alex Murdaugh, having Maggie Murdaugh's blood on his hands, having just visited the crime scene and handling those two weapons?
Again, I can't really say exactly how the DNA was deposited onto an item.
And then later you did some DNA testing on the white T-shirt he was wearing, correct?
Yes.
Did anyone ever tell you why you were being asked to perform those tests
Which tests do you
on
mean?
his white T-shirt?
The DNA analysis on the
So
T-shirt?
the DNA one, DNA.
It was submitted with a request for DNA for blood. And so when items come in with a request for DNA blood, we will test it. If it is presumptive positive, then we'll move forward with DNA analysis on that item.
So did anyone say, we believe he's wearing this shirt that night? Is that why you're testing it for blood? Just to see if that, right? Someone's asking you to do this work. Did anyone say, we think he was wearing this shirt that night during these murders, let's test it for DNA and for blood?
I know that the shirt was removed from his body when it was collected. As far as when he was wearing the shirt, I don't have any information about that.
We pull up what's been previously admitted as the Defense Exhibit 32. Okay. You recognize this, correct?
Yes,
And this shows where the cuttings were made from the shirt, right? The A, B, C, D, E.
yes.
And just kind of going through very quickly, cutting A down here in the bottom, did you find Maggie or Paul's DNA in cutting A?
Cutting A is item 19.4.
Yes.
For 19.4, Margaret Murdaugh was excluded as a contributor, and Paul Murdaugh was included as a contributor.
So we have Paul in A. In B, did you find Maggie or Paul?
For item 19.5, Paul was excluded as a contributor, and Margaret Murdaugh was included as a contributor.
And for C, which is going up a bit, so now we're off the bottom of the shirt, did you find Maggie or Paul?
For item 19.6, again, I was not able to make any comparisons to Paul due to the relatedness of the contributors. But Margaret was included as a contributor to that mixture.
Okay. For cutting D, now we're up at the right shoulder. Did you find Maggie or Paul there?
For item 19.7, I could not make any comparisons to Paul due to the relatedness of the contributors. And Margaret was included as a contributor to the mixture.
Did you also find Nolan Tootin in D?
He was also included as a contributor to the mixture.
Going over to the other shoulder, did you find Maggie or Paul in E?
For 19.8, Paul Murdaugh was excluded as a contributor. And Margaret Murdaugh was included as a contributor to the mixture.
Okay. So no Paul but Maggie there. Now coming down all the way to the bottom, G. Did you find Maggie or Paul there?
Paul was excluded as a contributor to the mixture.
Now, finally, for both F and H up here, did you get any results for either one of those?
For 19.10, Margaret was also included as a contributor. Sorry, just to finish that result.
Sorry.
You were asking about,
F and H, did you get any results for either one of those?
for F, which was our item 19.9, a DNA profile was developed, but due to the inability to determine the number of contributors, no further interpretation will be offered. For H, which is our item 19.11, Paul was excluded as a contributor. And for Margaret, the comparison to Margaret, an uninformative statistical result was obtained. No conclusion can be made regarding Margaret Murdaugh as a possible contributor to the mixture under the listed propositions, which in this case, the propositions were Richard Alexander Murdaugh and Margaret Murdaugh contributed to the mixture versus Richard Alexander Murdaugh and an unidentified, unrelated individual contributed to the mixture. And that's a situation I described earlier where the seesaw is balanced, so it can't tell me in either direction which scenario is a better explanation of the DNA profile.
So the only part of this shirt that we see right here, the front, where you can say that you did find Paul's DNA is down here at A, the bottom right part of the shirt, correct? Don't see.
For item A, I did have an inclusionary likelihood ratio for Paul. For several of the other stains, there was, I could not distinguish between him and other related individuals, so I could not make comparisons to him.
But the only place you definitely did find Paul was A, is that correct? On the front of the shirt.
That was the only item where there was an inclusionary likelihood ratio for Paul.
Do you remember when you did these, when you reported these DNA results? Do you know the date?
Are you asking specifically
Yeah,
for
the
the
date that you reported your results for the shirt, for DNA.
for the shirt? There were two reports that had the shirt because there were two times that it was processed originally. The first report, which had the results for item 19.2, was June 25th, 2021. And then the second report was originally issued July 25th, 2021.
July 25th, 2021. On July 26th, the day after, did you attend a meeting with President was Major Huey? I apologize if I'm not saying the names correctly. Captain Riley, Captain Reinhardt, Lieutenant Wallace, Lieutenant Schenck, Lieutenant Hash, yourself, and Mindy Worley. Did you attend that meeting?
Yes, I did.
And was the purpose of that meeting to discuss the DNA report?
Yes, it was to explain the results of my report.
Were you at that meeting asked to perform hematology tests?
Not at that meeting, no.
Okay. When were you asked to perform hemotrace tests on the shirt?
On August 10th, 2021.
And is that the day that you performed them?
Yes,
And I think you previously testified your test results were negative.
correct.
Tell us a little more how you did. Well, let me ask it this way. To perform the test, did you make smaller cuttings from the larger shirt cuttings?
Yes, so I took the cuttings, opened them, and then cut small portions of the larger cuttings to test for hemotrace, and then place those cuttings into a solution, and then that solution is added to each individual card for that individual cutting. So there's a test performed for each item.
Show you a series of photos, if I may. Ask if you can identify them. This is what's been previously marked, and the marks are on the back. It can be confusing. As Defense Exhibit 96, you recognize that? I apologize. So do you recognize the photograph?
Yes.
And that's one of the cuttings after you made the small cuttings?
Can I see the other? It's hard to tell which was before and which was after without the other cuttings, because there's cuttings for DNA, and then I cut along the cuttings for DNA. For the hemotrace test.
Yeah, I don't have. One oh two. 103. 104. 105. I believe this is the last one. Now go get the other one. It's over there. You already have this as a second copy. So now that you have them all, do you recognize them?
Yes.
And these are the larger cuttings with the smaller cuttings made after the hemotrace test.
I know that we took photos before the cutting was taken for hemotrace and after. It's hard to tell from these pictures if it was before or after, but they were taken during the hemotrace processing of the shirt.
Okay. See them, please. Your Honor, at this time, I would offer defendants exhibits 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, and 105 as evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
They're admitted without objection.
Permission to publish. May I publish?
You don't need my permission to publish anything that's in evidence.
Who would bring up the first one? And go get the whiteboard, please. Be sure it doesn't blow up the view of the TV. This will be quick. So in this one, it looks like you made 5 cuttings, is that correct?
So some of these cuttings were originally taken for DNA. I tried when I cut for hemotrace to also cut along where the cuttings were taken for DNA.
Okay, but there's 5 there, right?
Yes.
The next one. And let's see if we can count how many are here. Were you able to count how many?
It looks like 14. It's a little hard to see the very small ones. It's hard to tell
Okay, be
on the small
conservative.
screen.
If you're not sure, don't count it. So 14? No, don't do that.
It looks like 14.
Okay. Next exhibit. And here.
Eight.
Okay. Next one.
Seven.
Okay. Next.
Nine.
The next one.
Seven.
7. Next exhibit.
Looks like 9. Again, it's a little hard to see.
Again, be conservative. Don't count one if you're not sure. The next exhibit.
4.
Next one.
Nine.
Next one.
Two.
That's it. Those are all of them. So now we'll just add these numbers up. I have a calculator that will help. So we have 5 plus 14 plus 8 plus 2 plus 7 plus 9 plus 7 plus 9 plus 4 plus 9. So what's the total?
74.
74. And in your test, on none of these did you detect human blood with hemotrace. Is that correct?
For all those cuttings for the different items, they were all put together into that tube for that item. And for all of those tests, the result was negative.
So we're 0 for 74 detecting human blood here.
The result was negative.
Moving on, then on August 16th, did you attend a meeting to discuss DNA results or outstanding DNA reports?
Yes.
Were these results discussed at that meeting?
For that meeting, we perform card tests. There needs to be a second analyst to review the card test and sign off on the review of the test. So she was present when the test was performed.
No, 2021, were you ever informed that SLED was seeking a blood spatter analysis of the shirt?
I was told after the shirt had been sent that it was going to be sent for blood spatter analysis, but I don't know anything about how that came about or where it was being sent to. That was once I was done with my analysis.
When you say after the shirt was sent, what do you mean by that?
Or however they did the blood spatter analysis. I know that there is documentation that the shirt was being taken for that in the narrative, but I don't know how that came about.
And at that time, I guess I'm a little confused, were you aware at that time that it was being sent for blood spatter analysis?
Not until it was already sent.
And by sent, you mean that somebody had asked for the report to be made, or that the shirt had physically been sent somewhere?
I don't know anything about how the blood spatter analysis came to be. I don't know what they required for that
Okay, well,
analysis.
could you just tell me a date, the first time you learned that there was going to be a blood spatter analysis? Even a month, if you don't know the exact date?
I really don't know because it didn't have anything to do with me or my analysis.
When was the first time your hemotrace test appeared on a report that you issued?
The report with the hemotrace results was issued on November 10th, 2021.
Were the results for the blue raincoat also on that report?
Yes, they were.
Did you discuss the hemotrace test results with anyone working on this case?
I don't think that I discussed it with anybody else. I don't think so. I would have discussed it with the person who reviewed the results.
Did you discuss the blue raincoat results with anyone investigating the case, any agents on the investigative side?
I know for the raincoat, I was asked to give an update on when the results would be issued. Once I developed the DNA profiles for those items, The DNA profiles were technically reviewed, and then I was able to make a phone call to relay those results. And I was able to speak to Agent Gent and just give him the preliminary results for the items from the raincoat.
But you did not discuss the hemotrace results that are on the same report?
According to my notes, I only updated him on the findings from the raincoat.
Let's move ahead then to March 22nd of 2022. You just said that you were aware at some point that a blood spatter report had been requested. Were you aware in March that one had been received claiming that there was high velocity impacts blood spatter on the shirt? Were you aware of that report?
I didn't really know anything about the report or the results of the report.
So you weren't aware of it in March 2022, is that correct?
I don't know when. I really do not remember when I was told or what. I know that I didn't really get much information about the report or when.
Okay. Well, moving a little further then, on April 11, 2022, the Attorney General requested a meeting that occurred on April 20th, 9 days later, to discuss reports.
Yes,
And in preparing for that meeting on the 20th, did you access your November 10 report on April 18 and April 19, a couple days before that meeting?
I mean, did I look at the report in preparation for
Yes.
the meeting? I would have reviewed the reports in preparation for the meeting, yes.
At that meeting, was there any discussion of blood spatter?
I do not remember.
Okay, this is the first meeting with the AG's office after the report is received saying that there is blood spatter. Was it
But that had
discussed?
nothing to do with my testing, so I don't really know.
Did you notice that 6 days after that meeting, there were media reports that high velocity impact spatter had been found in Mr. Murdaugh's t-shirt?
I tried very hard to not look at any media reports involving this case at all, so I tried to avoid that information.
Well, at some point, did someone come to you and ask about the hemotrace test results that you performed that say no human blood, 0 for 74, in relation to this report saying that there was
It does appear that that April meeting was the first meeting after that report was issued, where we had a discussion about the reports.
So it would have been that meeting that had been discussed, your hemotrace test results and the blood spatter report discussed in the same meeting?
Possibly, but I don't know that, I also wasn't present for all of the meetings all of the time. I know there were some times when there were meetings with specific individuals first, and then I would come later. So I don't remember if there was specific discussion of blood spatter there when I was present.
Handing you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 95. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
What is it?
It is a memorandum to the file for this case.
And you're the author of this memorandum,
Yes.
and it concerns Hemotrace and it relates to this case?
Yes, I was asked to do some research into the scientific literature to see if there was information about Hemotrace and potential effects of other kinds of testing prior to Hemotrace, as well as list some reasons for possible negative Hemotrace results.
I would offer a Defendant's Exhibit 95 into evidence.
Says the state.
No objection, Your Honor.
Submitted without objection.
Were you asked to write this memo?
Yes.
Who asked you to do this?
Creighton Waters asked for me to do this research and then summarize my findings in the form of a memo.
Did he tell you why he was asking you to do this?
Because there were negative Hemotrace results in this case from the shirt, he wanted just some more information on negative Hemotrace results.
Was it specifically because of the report saying high velocity impact spatter?
I don't know that.
Was that discussed when he asked you to do this?
We discussed the negative Hemotrace results on the shirt.
Did you discuss a report by a man named Tom Bevel?
I don't think we specifically discussed the results of that report because I don't know. I'm not a blood spatter expert. I don't know anything about what that report would say or what the findings in that report would mean. I just know that there was a report, and then I was asked to give some more information on Hemotrace.
Were you aware of a report by Tom Bevel specifically regarding use of Hemotrace on things had been previously tested with LCB?
I was made aware of a report like that after I had already, obviously it was after my analysis had been complete. I don't remember specifically if it was before or after I was asked to write this memo.
And you attached some articles to this memo, correct?
Yes, I attached the articles that I found regarding Hemotrace so that all that information will be present in the memo.
And this first article from the Australian Journal of Forensic Sciences, am I characterizing it correctly to say that it reports that Hemotrace tests are generally effective after treatment with LCB?
For that article, there were many tests performed comparing testing Hemotrace after the use of several other kinds of tests beforehand. Their results were positive following LCV for 17 out of 17 tests with a blood dilution of 1 to 10, and for 16 out of 18 tests with a blood dilution of 1 to 100.
So it usually works. Hemotrace, when you're testing something that had a presumptive test with LCB. Correct.
Right. It shows that it did work the majority of the time that they tested it, but they did obtain 2 negative results as well.
Out of how many total?
Out of 17 plus 18.
Okay. So it didn't work 2 out of 18 times.
turn this on. Of the 35 times they tested it, they obtained a,
Am I reading this chart correctly to understand it to mean that Hematrace detects blood at dilution levels in which would not detect blood?
According to this study, which was performed by the Michigan State Police, they were able to obtain positive Hematrace results for some samples that were negative LCV.
So the Hematrace test is more sensitive than LCV, at least according to this study, correct?
It appears to be, according to this study. LCV is not a chemical that I use in the DNA casework department. It is a test that's performed by the crime scene unit, so they would be the best people to answer questions about sensitivity of that test.
According to this, you would get a positive result even if you couldn't see anything with LCV. According to the previous study, after LCV, 94%, and here we're over 74. Is it fair to say that there's no human blood on the t-shirt?
Like I said earlier, the test that I performed was negative for the presence of human blood.
Could we pull up 32 again? This will be very quick. Zoom in on the pocket. Sorry, I don't have an image of the back of it, but I believe this is the name of a fishing boat, and there's a fishing boat on the back of the t-shirt. Were you aware when doing this is a fishing t-shirt?
No,
Have you ever gaffed a fish?
I don't even know what that word means, no.
Well, let me ask it this way then. If someone were doing something while wearing this t-shirt that would cause non-human blood to spray onto the shirt, could that be a reason why something would have a misting pattern with LCV and test negative for Hematrace, 0 for 74?
I can't really answer anything about the misting pattern because that is not my area of expertise, but one possibility for a negative Hematrace test is that the blood present on the item is not human blood, because Hematrace is a confirmatory test for the presence of human blood. It also reacts to ferret blood and higher primate blood.
Doesn't react to fish blood, does it?
No.
Did you attend an evidence viewing meeting on January 5th of this year?
Yes, I did.
Was blood spatter discussed at that meeting?
I know that we talked about the results of the shirt. As far as blood spatter, again, I'm not a blood spatter analyst, so I cannot give any information about blood spatter on an item of clothing or on anything.
Specifically, were reports by Tom Bevel discussed at that meeting?
I really do not recall.
Even though it was just this month, well, last month, time's flying.
Yeah, it's hard to remember specifics.
Reports by a Deputy Kinsey discussed regarding blood spatter.
I don't recall that name at all.
Was the T-shirt discussed?
I don't remember the exact items that were discussed specifically.
Has anyone, I'm going to ask this. It looks like there's been a lot of work done on this T-shirt,
Yes,
and that's fair, right?
yes,
Put a lot of work into this T-shirt. There were the little cuttings in the beginning, the small ones in the hem, right? And then those are tested with
phenolphthalein.
right? And then DNA tested. All of these large cuttings, we haven't even gone over, there were a couple in the back of the shirt as well. These small cuttings, then you went back and made more small cuttings for the hemotrace, right? Lots of work, and then you're doing this big memo about hemotrace because of the shirt, right?
Mhm.
A lot of work, and this is going on from a period of June 21, the month of the murders. It looks like all the way up until a month before trial. Is that fair?
Well,
Work on the shirt.
my analysis was complete before that, but
I mean, you're doing this memo to file because of the shirt results, correct?
yes, correct.
So I mean, it's, so for all this work on this shirt, it appears that the theory was that he was wearing that shirt that night.
Objection sustained.
Just ask maybe this, the meetings that you've attended where the shirt was discussed, blood spatter was perhaps discussed, was there ever any discussion of a blue button-down shirt?
Not that I recall.
Never discussed? Okay. Federal court's indulged. I know you said it's not your area, but are you familiar with the term high-velocity impact spatter?
Not really.
You even know what that is?
No, I'm not a blood spatter expert.
Would you think that you could have blood spatter without blood? No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
When you analyze something, do you try to be thorough in your analysis?
Yes, I do.
And are you aware that before you analyzed this shirt, that there were presumptive positives for blood?
Yes.
Okay. And then when you analyzed the shirt with the hemotrace, what were your findings?
The hemotrace results were negative.
All right. The defense also asked you about touch DNA. When you analyzed those cases and shot shells that were found at the scene, what were you analyzing those items for?
For item 7.1, the request was for touch DNA analysis. For items 9 and 10, the request was also for touch DNA analysis, but because there was staining on the swabs when Rachel Wynn did her processing, she presumptively tested those swabs and they were presumptively positive for blood, and so they were forwarded for DNA analysis.
But for touch DNA on items like that, would you be looking for possibly whoever loaded those items into a gun?
Lead the witness.
Whose other DNA could you be looking for when you're analyzing those cases for DNA?
Typically, when cartridge cases or shotgun shells are submitted for touch DNA, we are looking for DNA of an individual who may have handled those cartridge cases or shotgun shells.
And is it common to find touch DNA on fired cases or shot shells?
In my experience, there's not been a very good yield of DNA on those items. From my understanding, when a bullet is fired, it is being put through a lot of intense heat as it's moving through the firearm. At least that's how firearms analysts seem to explain the process. And so the heat can affect the recovery of DNA from that item.
And also with touch DNA, do you know when touch DNA gets somewhere?
No, I can never say how or when DNA was deposited on an item.
So if I shook somebody's hand at some point in the day, could I have their DNA on my hand?
It's possible, yes.
And you would know when that got there?
No.
Now, do you determine what evidence is analyzed in a case? Do you look at all the evidence and pick and choose what you're going to analyze?
No, we are requested to analyze items of evidence.
So some requests for you to analyze evidence.
Correct.
Whoever requested for you to analyze the clothes of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh?
I was never requested to analyze those items.
And do you analyze items that you've not been requested to analyze?
No.
Thank you.
Very briefly, Your Honor. You were asked about touch DNA. Is it common to find touch DNA on an object when that object is discovered touching a person?
Can you repeat that question?
If an object is found actually touching a deceased person, would it be uncommon to find that deceased person's touch DNA on that object?
No.
And would it be uncommon to find a wife's touch DNA on a husband's shirt?
It would not be uncommon, no.
No further questions.
Step down. Ladies and gentlemen, you can go to the jury room for a break. Please do not discuss the case.
may now be seated.
Whatever we put in the envelope for, don't appear somewhere.
No, you turn it this way though, please. Proceed, Your Honor.
Sir?
Thank you. Your next witness.
Your Honor, the state calls Dr. Ellen Reamer.
Hold a moment, ma'am. Ma'am. You witness, right? Raise your right hand. Left hand on the Bible. Do you affirm the testimony you about to give before this trial shall give the truth to help you God? Yes. Take a seat in the witness stand. Adjust the microphone if you have to. State your name again for the record. Spell your last name.
Yes. Hi, my name is Dr. Ellen Reamer, Reemer.
How you doing today?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
I'm gonna go ahead and get right to it. And if you would, just tell the jury a little bit about your education that led up to you becoming a physician, please.
Yes. Okay. Well, I graduated from medical school in 1997 with a Doctor of Medicine degree. Following that, I did a residency in pathology at New York Presbyterian Hospital, Columbia University Medical Center in the city of New York. Following that, I did a forensic pathology fellowship at the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner of the State of Maryland. Following that, I did an additional fellowship training year at Johns Hopkins Hospital, Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, also in Baltimore. And I am board certified in forensic pathology and anatomic pathology. After I completed my all my education and fellowship training, I took my first job as a forensic pathologist at Wake Forest University Baptist Medical Center, Wake Forest University School of Medicine in North Carolina, where I remained for almost 6 years. But before being recruited by the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston, where I've been for 14 years as a forensic pathologist.
All right, and at the Medical University of South Carolina, you said you're a forensic pathologist. Do you have any professorship or teaching responsibilities there?
Yes, so I have also the title of Professor of Pathology and Laboratory Medicine. And because Medical University of South Carolina is a teaching institution, I am responsible for educating physicians in training as well as medical students. And that's an integral part of my job. So a lot of the work I do is observed by students and trainees.
And you mentioned you had some board certifications. Can you tell those to the jury, please?
Yes. So, you know, in order for somebody, there's the American Board of Pathology is the organization that certifies specialists in different fields. And well, the American Board of Pathology certifies specialists in pathology and requires them to take very long examinations and demonstrate and pass those examinations. And you can't just sit down and take them. You have to have achieved, you know, gotten through your residency training and fellowship training as well. So I managed to do all of that. And I'm board certified in forensic pathology.
And do you have any membership or involvement in any professional societies that are relevant to what we're talking about here today?
Yes, well, I'm a member of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences. And I also am responsible for editing journals. I have various academic responsibilities as well.
All right, and you mentioned editing certain journals. Have you published in the field of pathology over the years, given your professorships and your education and
Yes.
expertise?
So because I'm interested in, you know, educating the medical community, I published close to, I don't remember the exact number, but approximately 30 publications in the fields of pathology and forensic pathology. And this is also something that's valued at an academic institution. So you're not just practicing, but also contributing to the body of knowledge in your field.
Over the years with this experience, have you had called to conduct a number of autopsies?
Yes. So the principal responsibility of my work is to perform autopsies on deceased individuals in order to determine the cause and manner of death. And over the course of my career, don't keep exact track, but I estimate that I've done approximately 5,500 autopsies.
5,500?
Correct.
All right, and we'll talk more about what an autopsy is in a minute. Over that course of time doing 5,500 autopsies, have you been qualified as an expert and testified in courts of record in the nation?
Yes. So again, I'm not keeping track of every single one, but a conservative estimate would be approximately once a month for more than 20 years, which would put me in the mid 200. So about 250, but that's probably a little bit more than that.
And that's times you've been qualified as an expert in forensic pathology?
Yes.
And is that just in South Carolina or there have been other places?
Yeah, the majority have been in South Carolina, but also North Carolina, where I practiced for 6 years prior to moving to South Carolina. And I've also been admitted as an expert witness in forensic pathology in federal court a couple of times where I autopsied individuals who died on tribal lands.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move to qualify Dr. Reamer, Professor Reamer, as an expert in forensic pathology.
No objection, Your Honor.
She's so qualified.
All right, Dr. Reamer, before we get to your specific findings in this case, can you quickly describe to the jury what is pathology and what is an autopsy? What is it that your science and being a physician, what are you trying to do?
Yes, so the purpose of an autopsy is to obtain as much information as I can from examination of the tissues of the body, and in order to come to a determination of the cause and manner of death. And the autopsy examination is basically a specialized surgical procedure. It starts with an external examination. So before any cuttings get started, I look from head to toe. I look for anything unusual. If there's injuries, I review them. I look at them carefully and document those findings, as well as establish an opinion on how injuries may have occurred.
And obviously, because in cases where you have traumatic injury, there's no getting around the fact that it's very graphic, the things that you have to look at and the things here today that you have to describe to the jury.
Yes, that's just part of it.
Did you have call in this particular case to examine the victims of these murders, Paul Murdaugh and Maggie Murdaugh?
Yes, I have, the name is Margaret Murdaugh. I know she goes by Maggie, but Margaret Murdaugh as well as Paul Murdaugh. I performed the autopsies on both of these individuals.
All right. And do you recall what day that was?
I'll have to refer to my notes. Both of the autopsies on both Paul and Maggie were performed by me on June 10th, 2021.
And is it typical when you're conducting an autopsy that you have assistants there that assist you in performing these procedures and that sort of thing?
Yes, so I have assistants to help me with whatever I need, and the autopsies, I do the autopsy, and any assistance I need is done under my direction.
Sure. And then is it common that photographs are taken of the various injuries and your various findings as you do the autopsy?
Yes.
All right. And if any physical evidence is recovered during that autopsy, is law enforcement present or some official there to take custody of those
Yeah,
sorts of things?
they're not always present, but if they're not present at the day of the autopsy, they'll come back, and I seal all of the evidence up and with in secure bags, and then those are transferred to the appropriate investigator.
Well, let's go ahead and get to it, and we're going to talk about Paul Murdaugh first, okay?
Okay.
And we also, do we have some poster boards behind you? And the first one is marked as States 500. And can you explain very quickly what this is to the jury, please?
Okay, so you may have seen these kinds of diagrams. These are blank body diagrams. And so when I autopsy a man or male, I start with that diagram, and it's basically a vehicle for me to take notes during the autopsy, so I can incorporate findings into my final autopsy report. But this is not, something that, this is really for my edification, and so I can write things down, and it helps me when I write the autopsy report and to make sure I've covered everything.
And will this assist you as you explain to the jury the injuries that the two victims suffered?
Yes.
Dr. Reamer, let's again, starting with Paul, if you could very quickly, how many, did you observe any gunshot wounds to Paul?
Well, actually, there were 2 shotgun wounds, so that's different than a handgun, or so a shotgun is where there's basically pellets that are enclosed in a wadding. And the wadding, after it's fired from the shotgun, kind of opens up and allows all these pellets to be released from the wadding. And so the features of his injuries told me in no uncertain terms that he was shot with a shotgun.
And if I could ask you with the court's permission, if you could step down, I'm going to hold up this board, and if you could bring a marker with you, I've got a red Sharpie right here if that helps you. And let's talk about the injuries that you observed to Paul Murdaugh. And then if you could, for the jury, if you could draw on this board that the first shotgun wound that you observed on Paul.
I'll use my markers.
All right, let me put mine up real quick.
Okay. Okay, so in order to make things as clear to you as possible, I'm going to use a black marker for an entrance wound and red for exit, okay? So just arbitrarily. Okay, so Paul had 2 shotgun wounds. One of them was to the left side of the chest, approximately this location. And the wadding containing the pellets traveled beneath the skin through like the soft tissue of the left side of the chest. It didn't actually go into the chest cavity, but traveled beneath the skin and through the muscle and fat before exiting the left axillary. Okay, so it's kind of a straight, kind of left to right, right to left shot. And
just real quick, when you say right to left, you're talking about Paul's right to
yeah,
left.
that's right. So I'm always thinking about like the patient's right to left. Okay, it's not, if we look at it, it's from, would be from left to right. But we always, for consistency, it's always relative to his body.
Down here by the hands, could you put an R on one side and an L on the other?
Sure.
Just because I know I get confused.
Yeah, no, it is. And honestly, we all do this during autopsies as well, because especially we have the back and it's very easy to make a mistake.
And also, just real quick, could you write Paul up at the top there? All right, thank you. All right.
Okay.
All right, so you were talking about that first shotgun wound to the chest and where it exited. Were there
Yes.
any other injuries associated with that? Please continue on.
Yes. So remember we had wadding enclosing pellets. The wadding actually got stuck, didn't completely exit and continue to fly out. It got stuck right underneath the skin of the left side of the chest, like close to the armpit area. And we have a photograph of that pink wadding that remained in the skin of the exit wound. From there, multiple of the shotgun pellets started going through like the left arm, okay, starting from the underside of the left arm. So the wadding terminated in the skin, and then pellets kind of went out and went through the left arm. Okay, so this is the left, remember this is his left side, his left shoulder, his left arm. And then we've got a bunch of exit pellet wounds on the left side of the arm, and some also a little bit on the back. So that you can see this is going through, and then this is actually on the inside of the arm, and the exits are kind of on the left side. So
Was there any stippling associated with this particular wound?
yes, okay. So there was stippling, and I'll draw that over here, okay? So when a projectile comes out of the barrel of a weapon, be it a shotgun, a handgun, an assault rifle, what propels that projectile, we call, projectile out of the barrel of the gun? Okay, it's gunpowder, and gunpowder is basically ignited through the action of the shooter with on the gun. And so gunpowder is basically burning and projects the projectile out of the barrel of the gun. A projectile can potentially travel a very long distance, like, many feet or, yards or a long, depending on the projectile, until it hits something. Or if it doesn't hit anything, it could eventually lose power and go to the ground. But the gunpowder that leaves the barrel of the weapon can travel not too far. It only travels about up to 3 feet, depending on the weapon. So in this case, we actually have some particles of like abrasions from particles of gunpowder. And this is called gunpowder stippling. Okay, so we have stippling, which indicates that this wound was fired at a fairly close range. We can't say exactly, but probably no more than 3 feet, because that's our standard, could be anywhere from 2 to 3 feet. Interestingly enough, there were some markings on the edge of this kind of cookie cutter type of defect from the wadding going in that shows that some of the petals of the wadding are beginning to open. So this is very classic for a shotgun entrance wound, and at the autopsy shows that it went after going through the underneath the left side of the chest, it went through the left arm.
All right. And let me ask you this, and before we look at some of the pictures, which are very graphic, is that correct?
Yes, it's just the nature of the beast.
If this particular injury, was it immediately fatal?
No, amazingly enough, this really, if that was all he sustained, he would have needed medical attention and some stitches and irrigation of the wound to clean it out, make sure he doesn't get infected. But it actually did not pierce the chest or cause any internal bleeding. It did, however, cause a bruise or contusion of the left lung, and that's because there's a lot of energy associated with this, but didn't actually go through the ribs, but caused a contusion of the left lung. But he would have been expected to continue to be standing after this. It would not have sent him to the ground.
All right. If you could, there's a dowel stick over by your witness stand, and I'm going to make sure the jurors down here could see what you're talking about. If you could grab that for me real quick, and then we'll look at some of the pictures here.
Okay, what do you want me to do?
Well, I just wanted to show it to these jurors down here just to make sure they could see what you were doing. And then if you could just stay standing for me, I'm going to give them an exhibit to stand by and work with that. Dr. Ringler, if you would be very careful to keep these pointed this way if you could, but I'm going to have you just look through states 478, 479, 480, 481, and 482 and see if you recognize those images.
Okay. So these are photographs.
And just real quick, just tell me if you recognize them.
Yes, I recognize all of them.
All right. And these images that were taken during the autopsy you conducted of Paul Murdaugh?
Yes,
All right. And would they assist you in explaining the injuries to the jury?
yes.
All right, Your Honor, this time I've moved states 478, 479, 480, 481, and 482 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
Admitted without objection.
All right. Now, Dr. Rim, if you get the dowel stick and come around here to this screen, I'm going to put this first image up on the Elmo, and then if you could, we'll talk to you about these injuries and describe them to the jury.
Okay. So we can see, it's not great focus here, but this is the entrance shotgun wound on the left side of the chest. His left nipple is over here. So it's the left side of the chest. And there is some stippling
And
around
Dr.
it.
Rumor, I apologize.
Okay.
If you could come around and work this way so that all our jurors who are
Oh,
that way
absolutely.
can see.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right. So the shotgun wound is going in this direction. Remember, it exited that left side of the chest and then continued through the left arm. So that is a photograph of that wound, to the shotgun wound to the chest.
And we'll see some more close-up images here in a minute, but this is the entrance wound right here, is that correct?
Yes.
And then we have some injuries right here. Is that where those
Yes,
petals exited
That
into
is
the arm?
where the wadding, which is the plastic piece enclosing the pellets, terminated in the skin. It just didn't manage to get out. But all those pellets kind of got released from the wadding and went through the left arm.
I'm going to move, that was states 478 for the record. I'm going to move now to states 479. And what is this image?
Okay, so this is a more close-up view of the entrance wound. And you can see that looks like there's little, almost squares or pegs sticking out of the edge. And that tells us that the wadding is starting to open, because it opens up, it kind of opens up, there's petals. And this is a classic. I could put it in a book to say that this is consistent with a shotgun entrance wound. Okay, and we can see the dots around here. Those are from pieces of gunpowder that have basically impacted the skin because it's within a distance of 3 feet or so.
Moving now to states 480.
Okay, so usually when I take a photo, I don't want to go too close because then you won't be able to see where it is on the body. But here, this is recognized, this is the nipple, right? His left nipple. And we saw the entrance wound over here. And so here we have this is an exit wound where this pink wadding is basically stuck right there. And you can see these are the petals on the edge, and that's what gave that unique appearance to the entrance wound. Now, this is basically a cylinder that encloses lots of pellets. And then the pellets here, we start to actually have some of the pellets coming through the surrounding skin and then along the left side of the lateral side of the chest, kind of below the armpit area.
All right, and I'm going to show you what's been marked as states 111, already in evidence at this time. Do you recognize that?
Yes, so the entrance pellet wounds on the underside, the underside of the left arm. And interestingly enough, a lot of times pellets just go through the skin, but here we have some abrasions around the skin, and it actually corresponds to abrasions. We normally don't have abrasions with an exit wound, such as we have here, but the fact that we have abrasions on the underside of the left side of the chest corresponding to the inside of the arm indicates that his arm was down at the time of this injury.
So let me ask you about that. In your expert opinion, having done 5,500 autopsies, is there any way that Paul's hands were up when he suffered that shotgun wound to the chest that you've been talking about?
No, the autopsy answers that question, that his arm was down by his side at the time he sustained this injury.
And again, highlight the specific features that you observed that caused you to come to that expert
Okay.
opinion.
So if, let's just say hypothetically, if his arm was up, you see all of these abrasions around this exit defect and the abrasions around these pellet entrances. We wouldn't see that because they, those are caused by when these pellets and the wadding is pressing up against the skin is very elastic. So this is just kind of logic. I think you're all going to get this. It's kind of going to push the skin before it actually exits. The skin's going to stretch a lot. And if it hits up against the other portion of the skin, we have kind of abrasions, which are kind of scrapes on the skin around where it exited as well as where it entered. So these are sometimes called it's a shored exit wound. So the skin actually struck another area, and in fact, it corresponds exactly. It's like a reflection. We can see this is reflected. This one is reflected over here. So if we can only get that kind of a mark if his arm is down. Now, this is the kind of thing that, is the logical conclusion, and I'm confident that was the position of his arm at the time he was shot. And this is based on my training and more than 20 years of experience doing these cases.
All right, let me look at the next exhibit, which will be 482 for the record. And tell us what you see here, and also, if you could, how that also supports the conclusions you were just talking about to the
Yes.
jury.
Okay, so these are the exit pellet wounds on the outside of the arm in this area, right? So this is kind of like his armpit here. And we can see these are kind of just, these pellet exit wounds don't have the kind of abrasions around it. This is just kind of finding its way through the skin. And then this one is over here. So, and if the further the pellets travel, it kind of splays out. So after the pellets leave the wadding that is open, there's spread. So, but these are, exit pellet wounds, and we don't have the kind of abrasions to suggest that his arm was pressed up against anything at the time that those pellets exited.
All right. One other thing as well is when talking about his arm being down, of course, the wadding stopped in that wound still in his chest. Correct?
Yes.
All right. Let's move on. Just give me 1 second here to get some other exhibits and show them to the defense counsel. All right, Dr. Reamer, if I could get you maybe to stand that way just a little bit. I know we're in tight confines, and then we're trying to be as respectful as we can with these images. I'm going to show you now what's been marked as 483, states 484, states 485, 486, and 487. And just quickly tell me if you recognize those, and then I want to go back to the board before we talk about those pictures.
Yes, I recognize these.
All right, and those autopsy photographs that you took of
Yes.
Paul Murdaugh?
These are photographs that I took at the autopsy of Palmer.
And would they assist you and explain to the jury the injuries that he suffered?
Yes.
Your Honor, this time I'd move states 483, 484, 485, 486, and 487 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
They are admitted.
And Your Honor, I think all these exhibits, both he and I, 90% of them we're introducing will be under seal.
Yes, sir. And for the record, these are under seal, and I provided the cover sheets to the court reporter. Every exhibit except for the poster board that we're doing, the state would request be under seal because of their graphic nature. All right, Dr. Reamer, that was, and we'll come back a little bit more to that first injury, but there was a second shotgun injury as well. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. And I'm going to go back to State's 500, which is the poster board. And if you could explain to and draw on this diagram that second injury, and then
Okay.
we'll look at the picture.
So there was a large shotgun wound defect to the top of his left shoulder. And there were lots of pellets recovered in the left shoulder area. And from there, the it kind of just went across the top of the left shoulder and then went into the left side of the neck and face. Okay. And from there, his face actually was not destroyed from this, but there's a big exit wound on the top of the right side of the head. So this wound went from his left toward his right and upward, and with a slight front to back deviation. Now, what does that tell us? We don't really know. It's kind of going toward, it's sparing his face. It's going behind the face. Now, one thing that makes sense to me, how could that happen? If he was just standing, not everybody gets shot like standing like these diagrams, right? But if he was shot and his face was forward, it would have taken off a lot of his face. However, if he is turned toward the shooter, then it's going to go into the face here and go out towards the right back of the head. So to me, it makes sense that his head is turned to the left. Not necessarily completely, but partially turned to the left. And what happened here was an extremely severe, immediately fatal injury, because what it did was that after it went through the left side of the neck and face, our brain is basically held up through the skull. So we have bone at the top of the skull, but then we also have a bone that kind of holds up the brain. It went through the base of the skull, okay, which is kind of like in this area, the brain is up there. And this wound, actually, his brain was ejected out of the top of the right side of his head and actually arrived at the autopsy in a separate bucket. So the force of this wound actually pushed the brain out of his head. There was only just a small piece of brain remaining, and that's the brain stem that was attached to the spinal cord.
All right, and real quickly, going back to the first wound to the chest, if Paul was standing when he suffered that, could he have remained standing after suffering that wound?
Yes.
All right. The second wound, the one that starts in the shoulder and goes in here and then out the top of his head, what would have been the effect of that wound?
That would have been immediately fatal, and he would not have been standing. He would have just fallen to the ground.
All right, and would he have been capable at all of bracing his fall or anything like that with a catastrophic injury like that?
No, that's instantaneous death.
All right. Did you notice any abrasions on his face or anything like that?
Yes, he did have, and it's depicted in one of the photographs. He does have a kind of a scrape on his face, and very frequently scrapes on the face that it has a slight directionality. It's consistent with a terminal collapse. So if he's hitting the ground with some movement, there's frequently kind of a linear pattern. And, all of this really makes sense. Once you see these things, you can understand that if somebody's going to fall with the force of their body, and they're going to hit their face on the ground, and we get some abrasions that correspond to that.
All right. And let me do this real quick. If you could grab that dowel stick for me, and I'm going to make sure the jurors down here had a chance to see what you've been drawing.
Okay.
So that's the shoulder right
Yeah.
there, and then
Yeah, I should have made a red mark here. be consistent. This is the exit wound on the right side of the top of the head, and the brain came out of that exit.
You mentioned a little bit about being consistent with Paul kind of having his head tilted to one side. If you could use the dowel stick, maybe use me as an example and show me kind of what you're talking about. You can
Okay.
position me however you want to.
Yeah, okay.
Let's go ahead.
So
Yeah.
we start with like a different idea, okay? In order to understand how that's the case. So if a shotgun wound is entering the top of the left shoulder, and let's say his head is turned like that, it's going to go right through the face, right? But if his head is turned like that, it's going to space be able to behind the face. So if somebody's just standing looking straight ahead, this most likely would have done a lot of his face. But the fact that the face is remained intact tells me that his head was, I don't know, up and down, but his head was facing in the direction from where the shotgun was.
And then the injury to the shoulder would have been where, if you just point with it?
Yes, so it's kind of on the top of the shoulder. This also did not injure his chest cavity. It kind of went through a lot of the skin and muscle and fat of the left shoulder. And there were a lot of pellets that were recovered from the left shoulder area as well as the head and neck.
And I'm going to show you very quickly what's been marked as states 110. And do you recognize any evidence?
Yes, these are the pellets that I recovered from the left shoulder and head area.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and if you could stay on that side so the jurors can see, and I'm going to,
This side?
yeah, if you could work on this side so that the jurors down on that end can see, and I'm going to look at some of these. All right, and I'm going to show you first what's been marked as states 483. And can you tell me what's on this particular image, particularly as to some of the things you were just describing as to the abrasion and things like that?
Yes, so we can see this is basically an abrasion is a fancy word for scrape. So there are scrapes on the right side of his face. And you can see they kind of have, you can kind of see that there's a little bit of a linearity. So if he just felt completely flat, we might just get like, you know, dots, but if there's some movement, we get, it's kind of, he's hitting the ground and then moving a little bit as his face hits. So we get this kind of vertical direction. And this is a very typical type of injury to the face that somebody might suffer from a terminal collapse. So after they sustain a fatal injury, what are they going to do? They're going to fall to the ground. Now, depending on the surface of, you know, if it's concrete or, you know, grass, we might get some, but this is very typical of, you know, I don't know what kind of surface it was, but a terminal collapse.
Okay. All right, if you would, with this image, and this would be states 484, please explain to the jury using this image some of the concepts that you've been
Okay.
describing.
So this is the top of his left shoulder. And this is the continuation of the ammunition through the left side of the lower face. And from there, it proceeded by a single piece of ammunition here that went through the top of the left shoulder. It tore it up, right? And then went into the left side of his face and neck. And some of these pellets also did a lot of damage in the neck because they kind of splay out as they go further. And some of them went actually through his airway and other structures of the neck, as well as continuing through the base of the skull and propelling the majority of the brain out the right side of the back of the head.
And now going to the sort of the end of that particular one, tell us what this
Okay,
image
so,
represents.
you can kind of see, it looks like this piece of his head. We're not really seeing the entire thing because his forehead is basically still intact, but you can appreciate at this point that, the contours of his skull are disrupted. And that's because there's a defect at the top of the skull, but not involving the forehead, so it's kind of in the back. So we know it started at the shoulder, it's been in the back. So his head may have been like that, facing toward the left.
For the record, that was stage 486, and finally stage 487.
Okay, now this is, all right. So this is,
I can't.
Yes.
It's hard for me to see what I'm doing.
it's
but-
okay. Yeah, so this is actually a photograph of the right side of, this is his, the face area. Okay, and I know that because I usually, when I take a photograph of the number, I usually have it like right side up. Okay, so this is the top of his head, and this is,
I apologize.
no,
Let me
yeah,
Do it like that.
yeah,
That might be a
that's
little
good,
better.
right. So now you can sort of see, this is the right side of his head, and it's horrible, I know. And there's a big defect there, and we can see the inside of the skull, but his face was spared, so.